your job require you to be on your feet? Do you walk a lot? How long is your break? What if your lunch was spent inhaling food from behind the wall, hiding from customers? What if your only break was either smoking or using the bathroom? Ugh, that's a horrible scenario. Today we're talking about the reality of restaurant life, what it is and was and is like for some of the horrors and some of the benefits of cooking or serving on today's episode of Potatoes Over Roses. Today's featured beer, apparently I'm featuring beers now, is the Summer Honey Seasonal Ale from Big Sky Brewing. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, that's a honey ale. Exactly what it sounds like. Today we're going to talk about the reality of restaurants, as you see in the title. Restaurant reality. I spent so long in the restaurant industry and I feel like there's so many things that people don't talk about. There's like, I don't know, so if you've ever read Anthony Bourdain's book, No Reservations, and I know it's kind of cliche to talk about this, but you know, he talked about a lot of this stuff, but he also pointed more towards the gritty, nasty nature of it. You know, like some of the disgusting things that happen. And I'm kind of like more trying to give a broad spectrum overview. Just like this is a podcast. I don't want to get crazy into it, but I'm going to share some stories and if you have any stories from your experiences in working in restaurants, whether it be fine dining or casual, whatever. Post your comments below, and if it's on the video, if it's not, then post it on the Spotify podcast. All right. First off, when you start in a restaurant, you're the new guy, right? And nobody likes being the new guy in a business. In restaurants, it's very much like other trades. Granted, it's changed a lot, and the culture is definitely a lot different than it used to be. But when I started, there was still a bit of hazing, or I guess you could call it like minor pranks here and there, like. I remember, okay, this might get a little bit vulgar, so I'll do a less vulgar version. How about this? When they'd send me to go find the left-handed spatula, which I never actually went. I'm not that stupid, but some people believe that stuff. Or if a bartender asked the new bar back, "Hey, can you go get me a case of soda water?" If you don't know that soda water is just water and gas, then you probably would be gullible enough to go look for a box of soda water, because soda usually comes in a box of syrup and then they add gas to it. Or, dirty restaurant language terms, and you're like, wait, what did you say? Calling metal scrubbies dirty things, or how there's so many ball jokes in restaurants. Like, you know what? I'm just going to be straight up. There's some really nasty, vulgar things that happen in restaurants, and people say some messed up stuff. But the fact is it exists, and I'm going to talk about it. So here we go. My first good restaurant job, I'm not going to tell you which one it is. In fact, this whole podcast, I probably won't mention names or restaurant names. Anyways, they asked me to go ask the owner, who was the chef, "Hey, can you go ask for a space?" Excuse me? A space? You'll know what I'm talking about. It's Metal Scrubby. Just go ask him. That's what I did, and he looked at me straight in the eyes like, "Nicholas, this is a family restaurant. It's called a Metal Scrubby." And then all the ball jokes, because, working like pizza or something, or even meatballs, there's, "Go get me a tray of balls," or those 5 or 10 pound, the 10-pound logs of ground beef, they call them chubs. And so the half pound is called a half chub. It's kind of silly, and then there's regular restaurant terms, things that you don't know, but you have to learn on the job, and that's just part of being the new guy. You have to learn the language, and every time you go to a different cultural style food, whether it be Mexican food or Chinese food or Japanese food or whatever, you have to learn the same words or some of the similar words in that language just to be a part of the program. You're trying to adapt yourself to whatever place you're working with. And it makes sense. It's just part of a job, right? Just sometimes it can get a little nasty. I worked with some guys that were trying to come up with their own energy drink, and they're talking about it all the time. They're calling it donkey punch. We can talk about the culture a little bit more. Casual versus fine dining. Sometimes there's yelling. It's not as much anymore, especially in fine dining. Especially in places like Seattle. But a lot of the times there's foul language, even in fine dining. it's something you're going to run into if you're sensitive to that stuff. You have to say it up front. Hey, I'm not okay with this. The yelling thing, I've experienced it. I've never been yelled at, but I've seen people being yelled at for basically nothing because people have anger issues, and it's usually someone in charge. And honestly, if I were you, I'd just avoid that. Like, if you're working for somebody who has anger issues, I would probably find another job. In restaurants, there's plenty of them out there. Everybody's trying to find somebody to work for them right now. Sensitivity, some people are ultra sensitive. I've worked in non-restaurant positions where I was having a bad day. It had nothing to do with anybody else. It was just stuff that was going on outside of work, and I was just frustrated, and someone thought I was mad at them. I hadn't even said anything to them, but people are sensitive, and so we have to take that into account when we're going to a job site or a job workplace. Sexual harassment has been a real big one in the last couple of years that has really come to the surface, and I think that's just part of what's going on in the world right now. Like some of the restaurants that I've wanted to go visit, I've learned some bad stuff has happened, but it's being revealed, and people are, being honest about it now, and they're admitting to it, and it's being dealt with, which is really good. But it still exists, so watch out for that. Stand up for yourself. The other one is respect. If you have a boss, obviously you have some sort of respect. They're your superior, but in higher end restaurants, there is much more of a, I don't want to say militaristic, but the hierarchy is definitely set up in a similar way. You have your bottom of the totem pole, dishwashers and bus boys or whatever. But then you have line cooks and different levels of line cook, people doing different things. You have prep cooks. And then you have your sous chefs, and you have your chef de partie, and you have your chef de cuisine. A lot of this, you might not know the language, but there is a hierarchy in restaurants, and a lot of the time, even if you know something more than the person above you, their opinion is going to matter more. Granted, if you work for people who actually care about their people, they're going to listen to you. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. You might luck out, or you might get into one of those good situations. Next thing I wanted to bring up was bad versus good practice. Like, how is a restaurant owner or whoever's in charge going to handle a situation? Sometimes there's weather things that we can't control. Power goes out, or a flood, or something like that. And the power goes out. Yeah, you gotta shut it down. Unfortunately, sometimes you can they can call the power company and be like, yeah, we're going to get it up in this amount of time. And so there might be that window of, hey, maybe we can save this. That way you don't have to throw anything out, because that's unfortunately what happens with restaurants. Is if the power goes out for too long, then they either have to throw it in the coolers, keep it ice cold, or it has to go in the garbage, and it sucks because it's so much money. It's it's a disposable inventory, unfortunately, and that's why restaurants are so difficult to keep going. Unfortunately, I've been in scenarios where there has been a flood in the basement of a building, and instead of shutting down the restaurant, the owner made us put bags on our feet. And that's when the rats come in, and who wants to deal with rats? It's a real problem. Most major cities in the world have rats, and you may not like to think about it, but they do like to go in restaurants, and they do get into things, and then there goes more money, and then you have to actually, I don't know how many I've actually called pest control, but I've worked in a couple of them where they set traps, or the water bucket trap, or the health department. A lot of the times the health department just pops in. You don't know when they're coming. They're supposed to do it twice a year, I think, here in Seattle at least. It's funny because most of the time they're fine. They're just doing the regular thing. Most restaurants are on top of that stuff. Most of them are going to, make sure that everything's where it needs to be. I've had situations where our line fridge literally broke that morning. I was dumping ice and bins underneath it, and as the guy's walking in, I didn't even know he was coming. And as the guy's walking, he's like, "Oh, did it break?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, totally trying to fix it right now." He's like, "Oh, okay, well at least you're doing it right." It's always a little sketchy because you don't know who you're going to get for a health department person. Some of them are real sticklers, and I've actually had experiences where there was a health department lady with a trainee with her, and they're just walking around the restaurant, poking thermometers and stuff without cleaning the thermometers off in between. They're just cross-contaminating things. She straight up walks into my cooler, sticks her thermometer and pokes through a plastic bag into some greens that we had just cooled after cooking, and juices are just going everywhere. And you'd think that she would think about this ahead of time instead of herself causing cross-contamination and oozing juices everywhere, but no. It's not always the same. Every experience is different. Sometimes you have, actually most restaurants have rental dishwashers. The really fast ones that take like 2 minutes. Autochlor is a rental. And so you have to pay that every time you run it, which means it has to be full every time you run it because it costs money every single time. That's another cost. That's another thing that we have to think about in that industry. Every little detail is a cost. Or open kitchens versus closed kitchens. How many times have you walked into a restaurant and you can't see inside the kitchen, or there's like just a little window? And there's a reason for that, because it makes it really hard to like, let's say if they hurt themselves, like accidentally cut a finger. It happens from time to time. It doesn't happen that often, but if it does, people don't want to see that. A lot of times they have open kitchens, and the reason they do that is because they want to show you that they're all super hyper professional, which is great, but it doesn't hide the fact that no matter what, it's going to happen eventually. Someone's going to cut their finger. Or drugs and alcohol. That's a good and bad thing right there. Unfortunately, most of the industry has either been on drugs and alcohol, or is on drugs and alcohol, and that makes it really difficult to keep some people around. I think the biggest one is dishwashers, like people to wash the dishes. I always say dishwashers are like basis. They're either really, really good, or they're on drugs. And they're flaky, Unfortunately, a lot of times that they can be both. They're really talented, really good at what they do, but then they're also like not showing up because they're drugged out or wasted from the night before. And then you run into a lot of people who are super, sober, and they have been for a long period of time. What about breaks? Like, I know in most states you have to have a minimum every 2 hours, and then a minimum lunch every 4 hours or whatever. Restaurants, at least my experience, breaks are very few and far between, and sometimes almost non-existent, because the workload is so high, especially when there's a lack of employees. So some people have to take over a lot of the work. Like if there's no prep cook, then somebody has to come in early and do the work, and then they're getting less breaks because they have a time crunch and they need to get it done so that way service is ready. And it's definitely illegal, but it happens, and it's just how it is. And I don't know if it's changing or not, because I haven't been doing it in the last 2 years. Yeah, about 2 years now. And I mean, I hope things are changing. But like I said earlier, it's really hard right now for businesses to get employees, because nobody wants to do what they did before, or at least want to work, because they realize they can really work the employer for more now. So, as well as like time off. Like if you're just an hourly employee, you don't get paid time off. I mean, you can get sick time because it's the law, but you don't get paid time off unless you're salary. And in that case, like I was salary, and I worked 65 plus hours a week, and I made less than the line cooks because you can't get tips as a salary employee. It's also another one of those legal situations. People who aren't getting paid all of their tips. That happens a lot in restaurants. I hear that from friends. Like I've heard that before many times from people I know that I've worked with before, but they were in other restaurants, so they don't get paid. And like people get sued, and restaurants get burned, and it not literally, but it just happens, man, and it sucks. It just means that people are being robbed, unfortunately. Or when you're hired for one position and you're given another position just because that they don't want to make somebody who may not have as much experience as you feel bad, but they've been there a lot longer than you because you're the new guy. But I don't know. I mean, it's happened to me once or twice, but I still get paid the same. If you get paid the same, it's not a big deal. It's easy money or whatever. It's restaurants. It's just part of how it is. Unless it's like your dream job, I don't know what to tell you. It's just situations. It may be different for you. I don't know. I mean, I'm only one person. I would really love to have someone sitting here to bounce some of these conversations off of. If you guys want to be on the podcast, leave a message. No matter what, working in restaurants has always been a passion. It's a passion job. No matter like whoever you are, if you're just cooking to cook, you're a cook. If you're working in restaurants and you want to pursue it and you want to get better and better and you want to be a badass chef or work in a Michelin restaurant or maybe you just want to do barbecue. I don't know. No matter what, it's a passion job. Unless you don't know what you're going to do with your life. That's the other scenario. But the thing is, it's a lifetime skill. It's going to stay with you. And you're always going to be able to, feed your friends and family. Or you maybe even impress them a little bit. Make something fun and fancy. And if you can do it, do it, Respect yourself. Be kind to each other. Just because someone's a jerk doesn't mean you need to be one too. Take care of yourself. There's a lot of mental health in the industry, and I may not be in it anymore. And mental health may be just a big part of, the world we're in right now, but if you're starting to feel like you can't do it anymore, take a break. It's not going to hurt. If you can't afford to take a break, go drive Uber. Just saying. It's worth it. I mean, it's worth a shot, right? If you don't have a car, sell shit online. I don't know what to tell you. There's always another option. You don't have to just give up completely. Take care of yourself. If you have any questions, comments, write it below. Make sure to subscribe, follow, share. And if you like this stuff, I actually have a support link on my Spotify, and I'll actually post it with this video. This is Nick, Potatoes Over Roses. See you next time.